This is Physics for Psychics, where the mystical becomes scientific.
Welcome to Physics for Psychics, a show where we explore psychic phenomena and use physics to explain how it all works. Please welcome our co-host, Countess Nadia Starella Alexandria, clairvoyant, visionary, and author, who will be joining me today on the topic of what happens when we die. And I give you Countess Nadia Starella.
Welcome to the blissful world of Countess Nadia Starella, visionary, clairvoyant, author, raconteur, DNA research scientist, film historian, luminous prophetess, and ruler of the known world. Well, at least the first few were in line with the truth. I promise. The information that we will bring you, you will most likely not hear from any other sources. So I ask you before we begin, and I know this is not easy, Earth creatures, I ask you to think for a moment. If you could grasp and assimilate what we're about to tell you without judging it by your memories or beliefs or ideas about anything that you heard before this. Not easy, but give it a try.
Well, I'll start by prefacing what we're going to be talking here. The scientific explanation is when someone is dying, their heartbeat and blood circulation slows down. The brain and organs receive less oxygen than they need and work less. And then in the days before death, people often begin to lose control of their breathing. It's common for people to be very calm in the hours before they die. One thing that is very interesting is that people are usually weighed just before they pass, and they weigh them again after they pass, and there's always a pretty measurable difference in weight. They weigh less after they pass, so something left the body, but of course a scientist will never tell you what they think it is, so I'll pass it on to you.
Even our great ancestors, the Egyptians, recognized this. So let me start with the first surprising truth. We who are in the higher circles of understanding prefer to never ever use the two words D-I-E and D-E-A-T-H. D-I-E, D-E-A-T-H. What the enlightened master will say is one of the following. What happens to us after we ascend? After we rise, detach out of the earthly shape into our former ethereal glory? What happens when we go to meet those awaiting us in the other universes, the other dimensions? What happens when we're reborn out of the slavery to planet Earth due to gravity, and suddenly we are a mystical blend of colors and genius and the knowing of the all that is? Can you see there are infinite possibilities with this type of view of what happens? And remind me at the very end of our show today to recite the final chapter of my recent book, An Ordinary Earth Angel with Extraordinary Gifts, because it also deals with some of these things. Where I'm from, an ascension is celebrated. That's New Orleans. We have a party, we play music. Oh, the soul is rising to heaven. Praise the Lord. Another thing that I want to throw in here is when I was about 5 years old, my mother said to me, now children, I want you to understand something. The moment you're born into the earth world, you begin your journey heading for the next life. So I don't want you to be too nervous or attached to the time frames when other mortals decide they want to break out of their earthly cocoon and fly off into the sunset. This stayed with me for a long, long time, and seems to be an interesting way of looking at it. What do you think?
I think that the more we get ready for death, the more we accept it as part of life, the better and happier we will be while we're here. Like I've told you before, to me, we're actually actors in a play. We're in a Broadway show, and when the show ends, we leave, and then a new show begins, and we come back. Maybe not in the same bodies, maybe not the same exact person, but that's my personal belief. And what is interesting is that we find accounts from so many people that have had near-death experiences that pretty much tell the same story, that they see a bright light. Sometimes friends or family who have passed come to help them, guide them into this new journey. And the big mystery is what happens. I think a lot of these people who almost died and came back, they have a similar experience, but very few of them talk about beyond seeing the light and going into the tunnel. So just wondering, do you have any thoughts about what happens after that episode?
Quite naturally, I have all the truths, facts, philosophies that matter, that are important. However, I know that even among our rare, hallowed viewers, there are some who have been so indoctrinated by the tenets of both philosophy and religion, they may have a hard time accepting it. But I would say this phrase is the most significant. Well, that all depends on who you are at the time you ascend. What will happen to a giraffe? What will happen to an owl? What will happen to a beginner on the treadmill of birth and death in the human incarnation, or to someone who has mastered the truths of being open-minded enough to both guess at what's coming and to attempt to create it? Because many great spiritual gurus, avatars, bodhisattvas, leaders like myself have said, where your consciousness is at the last moments will have a huge influence. And why, I wonder, has it been so convenient for so many people to say the exact same thing happens to everybody? That's like everybody going on a cruise ship, not knowing what the destination is. How prepared are you? Well, what memories did you bring with you to create the next life or existence or incarnation? Most great thinkers, even great scientists, have thought there's got to be something there. Since the energy doesn't really disappear, it usually is reorganized, just like, what's that thing that they have on Star Trek? The what? Where they go in the thing.
The teleporter.
Yeah, that one. I think it's really something like that. And when we're making our preparations, if we are assuming that we're getting near our very short concentrated time on Earth, it's good to think, now there's a chance I may be making a transition. So let me just think. What would my version of God like me to do, reappear as? And what would I like to be? I know where I'm going. I'm going back to my favorite place in the universe, the Pillars of Creation and the Eagle Nebula. And I will meet many visitors there from past, far, far, far distant past lives there. Now, there are those souls who think, you know what? You're gone and it's over and that's it. But I believe those are in a shrinking minority because the phenomena that we are able to calculate, realize, analyze now is telling us that there's much more than we ever dreamt possible. What do you think?
I think that quantum physics and modern science is showing that there's a lot more possibilities than we previously thought.
Do you think there's a chance that my belief that we can choose how and where we're going to materialize could be a possibility?
Sure. The reason I believe it could be possible is because I personally have experienced moments of remembering past lives. And if you had a past life, that means you were born before and you came back in some manner. So I also think that reality as we know it is very similar to a video game in terms of being virtual reality. So in a video game, a character comes back, they have so many lives and they can come back until the programmer decides when to say that's enough, you've exhausted all your lives.
Something has just come to me. I'm not going to quote. I'm pretty sure it's a Sartre quote, but I'm not going to quote it because it doesn't fit in the vocabulary that I now use as an enlightened soul. I'm just going to say blank is other people. And everybody who knows this line knows what I'm talking about. I'm not going to reiterate it. Let's say the opposite of heaven is other people, because I'm getting a message from a few spirits to interject. There are a number of people who think there's a very distinct division in the afterlife of heaven and that place where nobody wants to go to. So let us once again ask those viewing to quickly drop all former beliefs and ask themselves, oh, what if there were only heavenly places to ascend to? What if that other opposite of heaven really doesn't exist anywhere else except here in this kind of tedious space on earth where so many people do not seem to have found the keys to happiness?
Right. So for you guys watching us right now, just drop some comments and let us know, what do you think? What do you think happens after, not during your dying period, but after death? Do we go to another place? Do we stop existing, or something else? We'd love to hear what you think about it. So it's just a question that a lot of scientists do not want to handle because there's no empirical evidence. We really haven't had anybody come back and tell us, hey, this is what happened to me, by the way. So that's the problem that we have, that we don't have evidence of those who have passed. At least in a clairvoyant sense, yes, people who are sensitive to those who have passed have received their message about what's going on the other side, but we just don't know. And again, this is something that we have to come to terms with, because there are only two uncertainties in life. One, that you were born, and the other, that you will die. Just like everything else in the cycle of nature that we see around us, those are facts that are immutable. Those things will occur. Well, obviously your birth has occurred, and you will die. But the question would be, what does death mean? And when we look at quantum physics, it's just some form of changing energy. It's one type of energy morphing or a metamorphosis into another. Uh, Go ahead.
I question myself every day how I survived my approximately 20 or 25 this close to ascending situations. Natural occurrences, temblors, hurricanes, near misses on motorcycles. But when in that state of trance-like, it's almost like a type of hypnosis before you fully return to your normalized self. In my case, and I've asked this question of many of my devotees too, certain things do flash before you. Some things that you don't even know you remembered. And I haven't not heard one single person say, oh, it was an unpleasant experience, to almost leave and come right back. Except there's a sort of enchantment with just beingness. You don't have to get up, don't have to pay anything, don't have to say anything. You're in a kind of samadhi, nirvana, utopia-like bliss. And then all of a sudden, you go, oh, phew, was I dreaming? What was that? I think most people who have experienced some shift of consciousness would have to agree that there's much more out there than we are aware of.
Well, I will tell you that I have had quite a few near-death experiences, and I'm old enough to tell you that I have been so close to death that I knew immediately that I was alive after that point by sheer miracle. And there was one point I'm in bed and everything turned off, like you turn off a TV. It was complete darkness. There was no sound, and the absence of sound is a really strange thing. It's like this vacuum. I'm awake, yet I see nothing around me. And at that moment, I maybe my heart stopped for a while. I can tell you that I knew that this is what death, the immediacy of death at that particular moment before transcending, making that voyage into the light, felt like. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying to feel that vacuum, that void that was there. I can tell you that I did have a situation around 1984 where I almost did die. I had a bad reaction to a codeine prescription that was given to me, and I remember feeling my essence, myself, floating away, and hearing people in the background, hearing my wife crying, and I'm in the ambulance. And what's interesting that I wonder, because one thing in physics that is proposed out there, and a lot of physicists say this, that we live in a universe where there are parallel dimensions, where every possibility of every life you could have probably had as a singer, as a movie star, as a computer programmer has happened in another dimension. And I wonder, because of what happened to me, if when I thought that I made it by a hair, I actually didn't make it. I just woke up in another dimension. What do you think?
I totally love this concept. have pondered it, thought about it since childhood. There's something to it. And our vast scientific knowledge right now, we have so much to draw from. Now, I want to say something else too. It is great for humans to be prepared for anything and to visualize the most pleasant way of getting somewhere, even getting to heaven, by training ourselves to be aware, awake, observant. We can make such a simple, smooth, unfrightening, peaceful transition. We don't want to let movies or old goblin stories make us think that we don't have the power to make a smooth, effortless, delightful ascension.
Have you had experiences where you have wondered if you actually did survive it and you're just in a new lifeline or timeline?
Yes, almost everyone. Because of having studied so much science fiction in childhood, the mind is open to all possibilities. But that, am I a butterfly in someone's dream? Or am I dreaming myself into existence in some place where I was supposed to be? The possibilities are infinite. A million ways to reorganize one's thoughts, to embrace the idea of our not knowing everything just yet.
And the interesting thing too is, really, at what moment are we really dead? As humans, we've always been fascinated with death and the idea of coming back to life. But is it really possible to come back from the dead? And what's the difference between a living creature and a dead body anyway? Let's delve into the scientific theories, but first I'd like to hear your answer to this age-old question. When are we really dead?
There is no DEATH. I don't even have that word in my vocabulary. There is only reorganization of the energy, transmutation, flight, ascension, movement. One thing that we can see is, at least in my experience, when one is above and looking down and seeing the humans left behind trying so hard to overcome their unhappiness, I believe that most loving spirits want to say something to the ones left behind. Oh my God, if you could see, you would know. I am still here. I'm right next to you. You can't exactly touch me, but if you could quiet your mind, you could hear and see me. So that's the kind of evidence from those who have either ascended and spoken through mediumship or through the keen intuition of those left behind, that if only we could see. It's just like falling asleep and awakening somewhere else and going, oh, I guess I'm free. I'm not in that space anymore.
Oh, I've had so many times when people that have died have come right at me and showed themselves, and I'll call the relative and said, is so-and-so okay? I said, no, they just passed. How did you know? Oh, that has happened so many times. So, there's so many mysteries to this, because a lot of what we do in our brain, a lot of the programming in our brain is this negation of death. We don't want to face it, especially this culture of materialism. We want to forget the fact that we're going to die, and I think it's bad for us. I think that we need to put that back in there and be a part of it. Maybe because of this consumerism world that we live in, they don't want you to think like that, because you probably wouldn't buy as many things as you usually do. But I think that we must learn to prepare for death. Every culture has different rituals. For centuries, humans have been trying to find ways to come to terms with this, which might explain the different theories and beliefs of the afterlife. I mean, from ancient tribes to modern Western world, people have important rituals and beliefs around around death. Excuse me. So all I can say is there are beliefs that can be matched with scientific theories, and there are beliefs that seem a little bit fanciful. Um, what kind of beliefs do you think are closer to science in terms of things that can actually be proven by modern science?
That is a question that's been asked for about, I don't know, 400 or 500 years. Coordinating science and mysticism. Even the great thinkers, the ones I love, like Newton and Einstein and Tesla, all seem to be interweaving the possibilities on both sides. And here's science, here's metaphysics and phenomena, and then here's this hologram that's created as one begins to think and imagine. So, scientific proof probably isn't as strong at this moment as it will be in 100 years. But there's enough there to keep the embers of excitement burning.
Yes. Matter, the big scientific theory of matter is energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's always out there. It would make no sense that we spend a lifetime accumulating memories and putting all this information in this data bank in our brain, and at one point when our body ceases to function, that it goes away without any use. That would be wasteful, and I don't believe that the universe is a wasteful entity.
No, the stream of consciousness that we have discussed before, all that was, is, and shall be, is floating all around us. And for a trained mind, which can quiet itself, these things are available to us to explore.
You do notice a similar theme for all the world religions when it comes to death. I think sometimes it's just the interpretation of any given, the person who's writing down the information for a given religion, but pretty much they more or less say the same. Okay, so here's a tough one. You know, there's this Judeo-Christian concept of heaven and hell and purgatory. You know, they have to add the middle one if you don't qualify for one or the other. I find that a little bit of a, when we don't have a scientific explanation of something, we create a myth, a story that carries on through generations. What do you think the concept of heaven, limbo, purgatory, and hell really is?
So, once again, I go back to one of my favorite times in life, age 6, where I said to my mother, "Mother dear, I want you to be prepared. I've got to tell you something. I'm not going to accompany you to church anymore. What's the matter with you? Of course you're going to go to church, Mother. It wouldn't be fair. What's happening there is so rudimentary and so man-made that I can't expand my mind if I stay in a box. I'm starting to see remarkable truths that show something different from what I believe. You're only 6 years old. What do you know about heaven, the opposite of heaven, and limbo land?" So, well, I know this. unequivocally. If I don't want to go anywhere but heaven, that's where I'm going. If I don't want to believe anything but heaven, that's where I'm going. So, because to control the populace, many religions have made this you do good and do as we say, or else you're going to that other place. It's like the dictates have been put out there, and the average person doesn't have time to contemplate, could this possibly be a man made theory? Is it even? Well, I'll tell you what, of these, I know a million people intimately, and the ones I've spoken to, of course there's an opposite of heaven. Even intelligent, educated people somehow seem to want to believe that the people they don't like are going to that other place. And even at age 6, I thought, no, this is a benevolent universe. What was that phrase? Yes, the Einstein phrase. I'm paraphrasing, and I'm not certain of the exact, but it's something to the effect of, there are only two ways of looking at life. Nothing's a miracle, or everything's a miracle. When you're in the, I'm going to create nothing but miracles, and everybody, even if they haven't been nice to me, I'll send them to heaven too. The quantum shifts because of the thinkers observing and having an effect on everything is happening. And even people who once would have thought these ideas were complete nonsense. Oh, it's in XYZ book of religion, so it's got to be the absolute. Well, Google has changed things and introduced remarkably expansive ideas. So I feel very lucky that I was liberated from FEAR and insecurity very young. I've been trying to get people to free themselves as well. But I also have so many friends and relatives who are steeped in a kind of directive that one has to be careful about when to introduce these ideas. That is why I always say the disclaimer, the caveat in the beginning. Can you let go of some of your strongest beliefs and entertain some things that could make your life remarkably better? Not only overnight now, but 1,000 years from now.
Yes, and there's another Judeo-Christian concept that it's really hard to really understand or put in practice. The fact that if you think that all you have to do is to repent before you leave, and that clears you from all wrongdoing, then what stops you from being bad most of your life until you get to the point where you feel your mortality, like, oh, time to repent. How do you feel about that?
That's a funny one because, once again, it's really the view of the believer. Most of these things are sort of ethereal, intrinsic. They don't have much basis except in our belief of them. So if the so-called, to me, there ain't no sinners, but let's say we categorize someone as a repetitive offender who at the end repents, his faith is so strong that he knows he is going to be absolved and forgiven and sent to heaven. Where do you think he's going? That's where he's going. In my humble opinion. Let us go ahead.
I do believe that there's a possibility that where you believe you're going to go, that's where you're going to go.
If only people, starting today, every single person who's watching this, could realize the awesome infinite power they have over everything. Through thought, through laughter, through abandonment, through a careful choice of words, through a realization of their empowerment, through a few simple techniques that even a 5-year-old can recognize. Overnight, we could churn from what we have now into paradise, utopia, nirvana. And all the thinkers are working on making the heaven down here. They'll make the transition even easier.
Sure. And the thing is that we have to look at it this way. Traditional Newtonian physics looked towards scientific methods when trying to understand how the universe worked. And that initial concept of science coming from Newton, and it was very 1 plus 1 equals 2. But interestingly, it could not predict a lot of the orbits of certain planets because it ain't that way. It's not always 1 plus 1 equals 2. So the problem was that science that stemmed from Newtonian physics reject the idea of the supernatural. They don't believe in the afterlife, and as a result, most humanists feel that we should strive to find happiness in this life and help others to do the same. So, is there life after death? I ask you again.
I personally believe there absolutely is. And is it the right time for me to recite the last chapter of my book?
I think this is a perfect time. We're about to wrap it up here, so we can close with that.
This is from an ordinary earth angel with extraordinary gifts, which you can find on Facebook. When the time comes for you or someone you love to ascend, be at peace. A host of shimmering angels guides the delicate soul into a peaceful sleep and directly into the arms of what is divine, where for the very first time the soul will know ethereal magic, an understanding of the all that is, complete freedom, joy, peace, happiness, nirvana. For as each soul ascends, a golden wave of healing energy gently cascades over the earth, bringing a new wisdom and understanding to every soul left behind.
Well, that was wonderful. Let's give it up for Countess, please. Okay, so this is our closing bit here, and again, I'd like to ask you about your websites and your book that's out there. And again, this is Physics for Psychics, and we take the supernatural and give it a little scientific spin and see how it whirls. So I'll leave you with Countess, and she will tell you a little bit more about her websites and books.
Please come and see me for a wonderful, insightful reading at CountessNadiaStarella.com. You can find my book on Facebook, An Ordinary Earth Angel with Extraordinary Gifts. And then I have another wonderful book about DNA called Orchestrating the Symphony of Our Cells at www.dna-alphaomega.com. Let me say it again, www.dna-alphaomega.com. I promise to enlighten you.
Thank you so much for co-hosting this wonderful show, and hopefully we'll have you back next week. And
love and blessings.
Love and blessings. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye now.
This is Physics for Psychics, where the mystical becomes scientific.
Welcome to the blissful world of Countess Nadia Starella. Today is the best day of my life, but then so were the 1001 days which preceded it. I have been blessed with many interests and see myself as a combination of Joan Rivers, Edgar Cayce, Bucky Fuller, Mae West, and Lady Gaga. Let's add Billie Holiday. I invite you to order my new autobiographical book, which took years in the making. An ordinary earth angel with extraordinary gifts. This is an autobiographical documentary performance journey, audio-video production on my life. It is a fascinating, unique look at both the incredible existence and philosophies of a clairvoyant, bodhisattva, scientist, author, raconteur, minister, musician, composer, costume designer, comedian, psychologist, artist, actress, international TV radio personality, master statistician, classic film historian, bon vivant. There are excerpts from my family dynasty, travels, past lives, secrets held nowhere else on earth, connected to DNA programming for health, success, happiness, prosperity, and bliss. It may be one of the first of its kind because it embodies the live performance of the Creator, as well as the metaphysical messages from spirits and masters throughout history. May all who read it realize their dreams, know that there are others on exploratory journeys just like them, who can lead them to self-realization. A little bit about myself. I have been designing clothes since age 10, a singer-songwriter since age 12, in addition to being a clairvoyant, classic film historian, philosopher, environmentalist, comedian, enlightenment facilitator, happiness coach, romance counselor, author, and visionary. I have lived in 30 states and 10 countries, most notably in Japan, where I was a TV radio star. My fascination is with boogie boards, architecture, mythology, history, science, physics, etc. My multicultural background gives me the ability to connect to humans from every echelon of existence, find out what's going on with them, and come up with diverse, divine, and often hilarious solutions to everything. My mission is to share my miraculous secrets to health, success, and happiness. I am a gifted purveyor of love and illumination. My teachings are easy, and I teach profound messages wrapped up in mirth. I give lectures, readings, make appearances at bookstores, conferences, expos, and on radio, TV, and the internet. I make friends for life, and I am a non-judgmental guide for thousands of people worldwide. I promote self-love and teach you how to get cooperation and validation from the people around you. Allow me to share my lifetime journey with you by reading my book. I promise it will change your life.